Now moving to our second keynote. President Obama has said many times, safe and secure internet is critical for the economic well-being of our country. Safeguarding our critical infrastructure is critical for us to progress and grow. And we are lucky to have our next keynote speaker, Brigadier General Gregory Touhill, with us. He's the head of cybersecurity programs at Department of Health, and he's the Assistant U.S. Secretary. He took this position when he retired from U.S. Air Force in 2013. And in his spare time, he has been writing books on cybersecurity. So he has 2 books available on cybersecurity that you can, get from Amazon. Without further ado, please join me welcoming General Touhill to the stage. Great to have you.
Well, thank you, Andy, for the advertisement as well. Appreciate it. As Andy mentioned, I recently transitioned from a 30-year career in the Air Force, and probably the biggest transition. A lot of folks ask me, what's it like transitioning from active duty in the military? There's a different change in uniform. I wear something different now. Well, frankly, I didn't wear a tie very often when I was in the Air Force. I wore, some interesting patterned clothes for many years. But probably the biggest transition for me is adapting to wearing glasses when I read now. And many of you I know are guilty because I see you out there nodding your heads in agreement. So I beg your pardon at times where I will put the glasses on and off. It's strictly out of vanity and the ability to see. But I do want to wish everybody a good morning, and especially a happy Patch Tuesday morning. For those of you who have the familiarity with cybersecurity, you know that today is the second Tuesday of the month, which for those of us who are information technology and cybersecurity professionals is Patch Tuesday. And that's where patches come out from Microsoft and other vendors every month. And it's an important part of cyber hygiene, what we call cyber hygiene, to make sure that you get your patches on Patch Tuesday and you test and install them as soon as possible. And for our CEOs in the audience, you can go back to your CIOs and your technical staff and wish them a happy Patch Tuesday and ask them what the status is of the patches that they should be installing today. Well, as Andy said, I'm Greg Touhill, and I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity Operations and Programs at the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States. That's a pretty long job title, but in short, I'm the cyber operator for our department. And having come from the Department of Defense and then doing some consulting in industry, it was really an honor to be appointed as the Deputy Assistant Secretary at Homeland Security to help our country and our international partners become more secure and resilient when it comes to cyber systems. And frankly, I'm very happy to be here today because any day outside of Washington is a great day. Now, today I'm going to talk about cybersecurity. And I am a self-professed geek who happened to marry extremely well. Much to the surprise of my fellow geeks out there. My wife is stunningly good-looking and very smart. But at the end of the day, cybersecurity is misunderstood by a lot of folks. And many of you may have fallen victim to this in the past. Many folks previously thought cybersecurity was all about technology, and it was a server room issue. I contend that cybersecurity is not a technology issue. It's a risk management issue. And rather than be a conversation item in server rooms, it needs to be a conversation item in classrooms, in lunchrooms, in boardrooms. Information technology and the risks associated with that, the inadvertent or deliberate disclosure of information becomes an issue of risk. It becomes an issue of risk for companies and for individuals, for organizations, and for everybody in our society. There's a lot in the newspapers and on television about disclosures of information. Hackers are appearing. And there seems to be every week an announcement of a new hacking or a new incident in the news. Well, I can tell you that we're extremely busy in the Department of Homeland Security in dealing with these things. And if it's been in the news, chances are pretty good my teams have been out there working with our partners in industry as well as in the public sector well before the announcements are made. But let me tell you a little bit about what I do, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what we see as a landscape from the Department of Homeland Security standpoint with cyber. And then I'm going to finish up with telling you some of the things that we offer from a Department of Homeland Security perspective. And then I look forward to joining Peter and the other panelists to answer any questions after our break. First of all, I mentioned that cybersecurity is all about risk management, and I'm pretty passionate about that. It's something that we all need to take a look at as we are operating our systems, as we're sharing information, and as we're doing our daily business and our daily lifestyle. But in trying to define what I do for a living, I try to use the example that I use for my mom. My mother is the typical white-haired, strong-willed lady who raised 4 kids, along with my dad, who is a professional engineer. And Mom asks me, so what do you do for a living? And I tell her I'm the captain of the Cyber Neighborhood Watch for the United States. Okay, so let me explain that a little bit better. Let's say that we are all living in the same neighborhood, okay? And to use this analogy, when you go into a neighborhood, chances are pretty good that a neighborhood is built by a developer, a neighborhood builder. So that builder uses some of the same materials in every house in the neighborhood. Do you concur with that? Yeah, it's economical. But let's say, we've got a great neighborhood. Everybody here in this room is in the same neighborhood. But then let's say that there's a guy named Andy. And Andy is breaking into houses in the neighborhood. And Andy has found a defect in the lock at my house, and he breaks into my house. Now, I want to be a good neighbor. I want to share with my neighbors that there's a guy who looks like Andy, and he has found a defect in the lock at my door. But I don't want everybody to know that it was my house that got broken into. Would you want somebody to know that somebody's been breaking into your house? Probably not. But you do want to share that there's a potential defect in the lock because all the neighbors may have the same lock. And you also want folks to know to be on the lookout for a guy that looks like Andy because he may not have the best intentions out there. So what we do in the Department of Homeland Security is we serve as that Cyber Neighborhood Watch. We get information from all sources about defects in products, on information technology products. We share best practices, which in the cyber world are often called compensating controls. We also share information about bad actors that we know about. But the thing that is very valuable for a lot of the folks that we partner with is the fact that we do things without attribution. So, for example, if it was my house that got broken into, we don't say it's my house that got broken into. We anonymize data so that we can promote information sharing. And we find that that's very, very helpful. And we process about 300 incidents per day through our National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center. Now, we pronounce that NCIC, and I normally don't like acronyms. And, I came from the Department of Defense that invented acronyms. But even when I was in uniform, I would tell my soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that I don't like them, and I find them as an impediment to communication. But in this case, I'm going to stick with NCCIC because just out of economy of time, I don't want to continually say the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center each time I refer to it. Now, the NCCIC works directly for me, and I had the honor over last year to serve as its director in addition to being the Deputy Assistant Secretary. But under the NCCIC, we have the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team, also known as the U.S. CERT, and I will refer to it as the U.S. CERT. I also have the Industrial Control System Computer Emergency Response Team, or the ICS CERT. And then we also have what's called the National Coordinating Center for Telecommunications. And their function is to help preserve emergency essential communications for the country. In essence, if there's another Hurricane Katrina that sweeps through, we work with the telecommunications provider to prioritize the restoration and the maintenance of the different systems. Because as one of my colleagues, John O'Connor, says, without fiber, there is no cyber. So we work very closely with the telecommunications and the internet service providers. So we work together as a team. We partner up with, throughout the entire government, along with information sharing and analysis centers from the 16 critical infrastructures. And we work with the public to form that cyber neighborhood watch. We also operate and maintain a system called the Einstein system. Many of you may have heard of it, and judging from some head nods in the audience, I see that some of you have. But in essence, Einstein is a collection of tools to protect the federal.gov enterprise. It's my job, along with my teammates, to use the Einstein system and other tools at our disposal to defend the federal IT systems at the boundaries. We do it through Einstein 1 with NetFlow, Einstein 2 with intrusion detection, and our new Einstein 3 with intrusion prevention and protection. We also are the lead for the rollout of continuous diagnostics and mitigation capability for the federal government. And you'll see that if you Google or Bing that as CDM, there's a whole bunch of information online about that. But in essence, doing the boundary protection through Einstein is not good enough. You also have to have the ability to protect on the inside. And CDM is a $6 billion program that we're running for the federal government that's going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're rolling out a common dashboard so we all speak the same language. And since we have representatives from 25 countries here, you all know how important it is to speak the same language and to have the same context as you are speaking and making decisions. We're doing that for the federal government using this program from a cybersecurity standpoint. We're given the common capability, too, to manage endpoints. Frankly, there's still some departments and agencies out there. Generally, they're a little bit smaller than the big boys that are out there that struggle at times to identify everything that's on their network. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about with the NIST cybersecurity framework. You also need to have identity management and access control, knowing and managing who's on your network and what they're doing. And then finally, you need to have the ability to manage events. Continuous diagnostics and mitigation gives the federal government that capability. And many of your companies already have that capability. And if you don't, I suggest you do. And then finally, we are charged with the Federal Information Security Management Act implementation. So we work with the other departments and agencies, and there's over 120 of them, to make sure that they are implementing best practices in cybersecurity. As you might tell from that portfolio of work, I have a very, very busy team. And we are constantly on the go, trying to raise the bar to make sure that we have a secure and resilient America. Now let me talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that we do. First of all, there's a myth out there that the United States government is all-knowing, all-seeing, and is holding back on classified information sharing. Let me tell you that that's, in fact, a myth. At the Department of Homeland Security, we're a champion of a couple of things. First of all, we're a champion of transparency. We want to make sure that we are transparent in all that we do. And you can't be an effective cyber neighborhood watch if you're holding back. So we work very hard with our partners in the intelligence community to declassify information as fast and as often as possible. Our default position is information that's classified and held back doesn't no good for the general public. So we are the champion of declassification of information. As a matter of fact, we've done a study, and we've found that over 90% of the stuff that originally comes to us with a classified marking, we're able to find in open source. So then we take that back to the intelligence community, and you'd be surprised at how fast we can get that declassified and shared. So we make sure that we get information out to the general public and to our partners. Two is we're devoted to maintaining privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties for our population. We're so devoted to that often for some of my technicians, they feel a little bit of some speed bumps out there in some of the things that they do. But that's okay, because we are doing the right thing to preserve the privacy and the civil rights and civil liberties of our populace. And how effective are we? We actually got an award last year from the American Civil Liberties Union for our programs. How many times have you had the American Civil Liberties Union praise a department or agency in the federal government? I mean, we thought it was pretty cool. And it's important, though, that we maintain the preservation of privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and that we declassify information as much as possible to raise the bar, heighten awareness, and make our country more secure and resilient, because the threat environment continues to grow. Now, I view the threat environment as punctuated by a couple of key groups that are out there. Now, the one that gets the most attention are nation-state actors. Very capable folks. There's a variety of different nation-state actors that continue to be mentioned in the press and with the pundits, the Sunday morning talk shows and the like. And they're, in fact, very potent, very capable adversary sets. Some of those nation-states are out there just to try to maintain better awareness as to what America and its allies and partners are doing. But also, there's some folks out there that are out there for trying to get a competitive advantage. And we see criminals out there doing this all the time. And many of you have been victims of criminals who have tried to go in and steal your intellectual property or gain personally identifiable information and try to sell that on Marketplace. Very capable criminal activities out there. So we work very closely with our law enforcement partners to make sure that when we go out there and do an incident response, that any evidence pointing towards the criminals is shared with law enforcement so that they can hunt them down and bring them to justice. There's also hacktivists. Hacktivists are out there. Frankly, many of them are acting in very criminal ways. But many of your companies out there may have also been victims of hacktivism, where folks who don't necessarily agree with your company's core values or your principles or your product lines or the like may come to try to do damage to you and your company through hacktivist activities on the internet. It's a threat vector, and it's something that wise companies, wise individuals keep in mind as part of their risk calculus. And then as I take a look at the landscape, and this is not, I'm going to digress, this is not part of the Department of Homeland Security's official position, but it's my personal position, is another threat environment that, and vector that you need to factor in is the just plain stupid. Now think about this. Nobody likes being called stupid, right? However, your folks in your IT staff, for example, they're not stupid. You're asking them to speak many, many languages. Languages such as different flavors of Unix, different flavors of Linux, knowing C++, all these different programming languages, network protocols, and the like. Your IT staff is not stupid, but sometimes they do stupid things. Sometimes they miss things. And all it takes is a crack in the door for a bad guy to come in and exploit it. That needs to be part of your threat vector calculus as well, as you evaluate what your risks are. And what we do within the Department of Homeland Security is this: we help address all of those for America's public and private sector. Now, if we take a look at it just as a technology issue, we fail. As I mentioned, it's all about risk. So within the Department of Homeland Security, we also take a look at the physical aspect of cybersecurity, and I hope you do too. For example, many of you may have seen the articles that were very, very popular in the press last year about a physical attack on an electrical subsector location in Metcalfe, California, where some folks did a physical attack on that subsector transformer farm. That could have some serious consequences. When you lose your power, you're going to lose your computer capabilities? Perhaps. You're going to lose your transmission capabilities? Perhaps. You need to take a look at your physical security as well as your cyber security. And often the lines blur between the two. So within the Homeland Security Department, we make sure that we are working with the private sector as well as with our public sector partners to safeguard physical security as well as the cyber security. And I hope that you do too as you take a look at your critical infrastructures. And this is particularly important with our industrial control systems. Please recall that I mentioned that we have our industrial control system computer emergency response team. Probably one of the more busiest groups that we have in the federal government as they go out to make sure that our nation's industrial control systems are safe and secure. But as we take a look at those industrial control systems, many of them were not designed to have cybersecurity baked in. Many of them are older, and they were put out as standalone systems, and later had, like Frankenstein, some communications bolted on for efficiency. So instead of having an operator in a water plant there 24/7, continuously there monitoring the systems, we later added on capabilities to allow remote management, put it on your cell phone, put it on your laptop, and the like. And often, we find that owners and operators of some of these facilities don't necessarily make the investment, or they've decided to take the risk to not necessarily provide the same safeguards for cybersecurity as they would for some other things. And often, that CIO of that local water company, and there's over 20,000 water companies here in the United States, that local CIO is also the system administrator. He does the books on the weekend and cuts the grass every 2 weeks for the facility as well. In other words, they're task saturated. So as we go out and we work through the ICS CERT, we work with many of you in the industrial control system sector to bake in cybersecurity from the manufacturing process, delivering products that are already secure and are easy to operate for those folks that are going to have to operate them in the field. And I thank those of you who are part of that collective of companies that are producing those type of products, because it is making a difference. But nonetheless, as we take a look throughout our society, and it's an international issue, there's a lot of industrial control systems out there that continue to remain exposed. And we need to make sure that we collectively add to our risk calculus the securing of those industrial control systems. Now, how can the feds help? That's the question that a lot of folks ask me. They say, hey, General, you came over from the military. We're part of a multinational company. How can you and your team help us? Well, first of all, I want you to help yourself. There's some people that I've talked with that said, hey, we spent all this tax money and still there's cyber attacks that are coming through. Why isn't the federal government defending us and making sure that everything is stopped? Well, a couple of things, and once again, this is my personal view. We can do that, but in order to do that, we probably would want to surrender some of the liberties that we as Americans enjoy, and we don't want to surrender those liberties.